Hi everybody, Cameron Farn back with part 6 of Red Sans character creation. Um, this is, as I left off in the last one, there were some adjustments to the fingers that I wanted to make. They were just a little bit too, uh, I kind of blew through those pretty quickly, so I just wanted to go back and reassess some of the forms um, and add some elements that I thought were missing anatomically. Um, One of them being the compression of the finger on the palm side. Um, Usually what happens when you compress your fingers is you have, that compression line is further into your palm than your knuckle is on the backside. So it's compressing meat and pushing it back and creating the crease. There was also the undefined knuckle in the palm that had to be placed properly in both the main digit and that secondary digit. Um, this stage is sort of um, I'm calling this sort of that refinement stage where you've got your secondary forms in, you've sort of nailed a basic layout of your wrinkles, some directionality, some compression and stretching and things like that for most of your muscle forms. We've done a little tightening up on that mask shell shape, and we've also looked at sort of the leg and of course the fingers and how they're uh, all going to function, and some of the reasons behind why those should function the way or being sculpted according to how they're going to function. Um, so now we're just going back to some more reference, checking those areas a little closer, looking at how um, portions of these elements should really look. And there you can see some of the correcting that had to be done in that main finger. It was just far too exaggerated for me. And once I went back through the video and watched myself sculpting those are one of the elements that popped out as being um, just gone too far, a little bit too over exaggerated. So now we're just working on the forms, bringing back some bone structure and some muscle structure, as well as redoing some of the compression that had to be blown away in the correcting of those shapes. So in this sort of refinement stage, now that you have all of your major forms done, this is the time, uh, that last video was sped up 2 times, so it was about um, I think an hour and 20 minutes worth of sculpting for all of that work. And here is about 40 minutes of sculpting to do all of the adjustments and tweaking to get to sort of prep this sculpture for the posing, which will be coming up next in the next video. So doing some transpose and what have you in our next one. One of the things I wanted to talk to you about today in this video was the use of some of the grooming brushes that you use for hair, and using those brushes to sculpt surface details like wrinkles. Later on in this particular video, once we get near to the sort of the back end, along the legs, I did some experimenting with the grooming brushes, and I think it was twist. There are a couple of, I think, 2 or 3 brushes that have that twisting action. And what I found is that they actually roll the surface of the mesh really nicely. And I used it here for those wrinkles, but I also used it on the maps painting for the fabric of his cloak. And those were some of those wrinkles and rolls of fabric were created using the groom brushes. And I like the way that it sort of twists and rolls that mesh and makes a beautiful shape that really can, depending on how you lay your stroke in, and we'll get to that later on in this video, but the way you lay your stroke in sort of a Z pattern connecting corner to corner can really draw in some beautiful starting forms to lay in drapery And because of the style of wrinkles around the knees and legs, some really good loose wrinkles for sort of fleshy bits of your character. And I use that approach as a starting point, and then I like to go back in, like you're seeing now on the hands, with the clay brush, and laying in some tubular shapes and kind of nesting those nesting those tubes of clay into one another to create that sort of intricate wrinkle pattern. And once these are done, I'm going to go back in after posing in one of the final stages of detailing, and we're going to put in some pores, some smaller wrinkles. But these are sort of what I call the secondary and tertiary forms. The details like pores and raised skin bumps and scars and those types of things come in afterwards, and you get to kind of enhance all the work you've already done at that stage. So here in this this thumb form, I'm just going back in and redefining some of the anatomy and making sure that those wrinkle forms follow function. And again, moving the crease and palm wrinkles in towards the wrist a little bit further, like in our hands, because of the direction of compression, it pushes material towards the wrist or towards the interior of the palm. So you just want to make sure that if you're looking at your hand on end, the wrinkles are behind the knuckle, especially in the palm. So there's some more adjustments to the hand. Yeah, there were a few corrections to be made here, and one of the things I appreciate about doing sort of this video tutorial style or this lecture style is that I get to go back and kind of view the video and see some mistakes that, or I wouldn't not necessarily call them mistakes, but refinements that are required in the sculpture. And I think it's a valuable tool for everybody to do, and can really take the time to enhance your work and getting a different perspective on sort of your own process. I'm finding it invaluable at this stage to just kind of record and go back and see how I approach the sculpture. And yeah, I take it into my next piece, make it a little bit better, and hopefully make it a little cleaner, and in my next sculpt I'm able to just do a better job, a little faster job. So after reviewing the video and looking at some more reference, what I wanted to do was just adjust the planarity of the shell shape. And it's always good to do some self-assessing, to really ask yourself, you know, why are you making those forms, but also are they really functional forms? And when I was describing this as a shell shape, I went back and looked at some seashells just to sort of re-familiarize myself with what those forms are really like. And what the mask lacked was a bit of projection, a little bit more depth, particularly in the side view. So I just started to pull some forms away and refine some lines to give this a bit of a little bit more dimension and a little bit more presence as well. So we're working up a little bit of a mouth form here in the shell, and playing with some of the concepts that I touched on in some early work for Red Sands, and trying to just create shapes that suggest facial features without actually using literal face shapes, and creating the shell form that does that with a mixture of hard edges, soft edges, and some bulbous forms. So really liking the eye slits, and in an early test character I created a very intricate shell form for a face that worked out very well, and it's been the basis for a lot of the starting points or kickoffs for a lot of these particular characters that have this feature. So this is one of the things I do often. Is I think it's important for all artists to become familiar with. Growth happens when you take the time to do really in-depth self-evaluations, and become a good critic of your own work. And when you compare where you're going with your artwork, given the sort of set of rules or parameters that you've set up for yourself, being able to self-evaluate is very important. Being able to tell when you're going off track and correcting that is really important, not only in your own work, but in a work environment. That's certainly one of the things that I look for in students that we bring on and train as part of our work program at F&D. So if you can, I think it's a valuable thing to be able to critique and evaluate your own work on many levels, so that you're able to move forward. It's just part of that streamlining your process, so that you're working with little supervision as possible, and again, just making the best use of your time. So for a 45-minute session today, this was a valuable period of time, and it won't be the last time I evaluate this in comparison to the rest of the model. As we move forward on different parts, when the hands get adjusted and detailed again, when the feet and legs get adjusted, the whole model needs to be evaluated one more time to make sure all those forms are rolling well into one another, and that they work together and make sense as a sort of a unified piece. So, and don't be afraid to do that. I think it's important. I certainly had to crack that fear in my own sculptures, and not be too precious with your piece until the end, and leaving yourself some room to make adjustments and changes that are intended to make the piece better. There aren't really mistakes. There are just sort of adjustments, a level of finish, and making changes with a purpose. So we're back at the arms here, back at the elbows. A lot of the other forms, you'll notice I just let go. I don't really go after the large forearm shapes, or the back, or the chest, or the biceps, because those forms don't require a lot of wrinkles. They tend to stay a primary or a secondary form with really minor skin details on them. It's areas like this where there's areas of high compression that require sort of additional touches before that micro detail is applied to make sure that they read as realistic, and that they sort of support the character visually as a whole. I'm using the Damien standard brush here, the DAM standard brush, and just drawing in into the creases of the forms that I've already created, and enhancing a few with a little bit more breakup. I did divide this torso once from the Dynamesh, so we're working on subdivision level 2 to put this adjusted details and forms in. And here's something I noticed too as an adjustment to the hand, as I wanted to have the extenders, that group of tendons and muscles, a little bit more defined um, in the forearm, and I'm going to go back and do one more final adjustment in there, um, just to make myself comfortable with the anatomy in that area. And I want to carry this sort of wrinkle skin detail up the arm as well, just to carry that form directionally up the arm. And I'm not thinking of this only in the pose that it's in now. When the arm pronates and turns upward, that wrinkle is going to change position. That skin detail, or that seam in the skin, is going to change direction. I think it's going to add something very cool, and kind of guide the paint and poly paint of this character later, when you can determine through that skin detail and an underside compared to the back side of the character. I think it's going to be one that delineates front from back, but it also adds sort of a point of interest that can be enhanced in the poly paint later on in this sculpt. I'm just testing a few BPR settings. And I'll often do this actually, test colors, test settings, give myself a little break in the sculpt while I evaluate it, and try and just sort of step out of the sculpting aspect of it and try a new color, a new material, or BPR settings, just to which all help in the end get this character ready for a final image creation. So we're back down here at the legs. As I said, I've divided the lower leg section and enhancing the details. Things do get softened when you do the go up a subdivision level, and you should expect to go back and touch up all of your work that you've put in on the previous subdivision level because of that. It's part of my workflow that I accept. The subdivisions are going to soften certain details. Most of your major forms are not going to be affected, like your large thighs and forearms and things like that. But these secondary and tertiary forms that you're throwing in, wrinkles in knees, this kind of stuff does get softened. So you have to be prepared to go back and do the work necessary to bring them to that next stage of finish. And that's really what the subdivision levels allow me to do. I know that I'm going to have to do it. I expect it, so it's just become a part of the workflow. And yeah, I really like being able to go up and down when necessary. But I know that when I hit subdivide, I'm on to the next step, and it just for me it's a push forward. So it makes you move for sure. Here's an example of, in this area, you're going to see a lot of forms, the zigzagging back and forth, the creation of these sort of V-shaped or Z-shaped wrinkles that you find in drapery. And I enhance them a little bit more at each stage and add this sort of finer wrinkle as it fades off up the thigh or down the leg. And here's a technique that I wanted to share with everybody that I used previously on the Maps character, on some of the clothing, and on a few of the wrinkles in the body. What I did was I went back into the brush set and I grabbed a Groom Spiral from the grooming brushes for the hair. And it has a wonderful roll and twist that it does to the surfaces of or to all the topology, and I've used that to create drapery and wrinkles in skin. And here I'm just kind of testing out the settings in different areas to see what I can to see which of those brushes works the best, but also which one's going to create the roll and kind of layering that this brush seems to do automatically the best. So now it's just a few tests back and forth with the groom spiral, groom twist, and or the variants on those brushes. Um, Groom twist, groom twister, groom twister 2, those were actually pretty strong in terms of their initial settings, but groom twist slow worked really well. And I think we just ended up using the groom twist, the basic brush, with some adjusted strength settings to create some of these basic wrinkle forms around the leg. And actually it works surprisingly well. But again, a wonderful brush that creates an interesting form, not necessarily meant for skin, not necessarily meant for fabric, but it's a great example of one of the things we talked about in the last video, which is bringing reference in from other areas into your character to sort of influence the direction your character goes. You wouldn't think of grabbing a groom brush to do this, but it works the surface so beautifully. There's no reason not to use it in cases like this, and for this type of wrinkle in particular. But it worked wonderfully for the drapery on maps, and here, it demonstrated equally well its ability to be used for wrinkles on the skin. So particularly in areas like this where they're small and you're sort of swiping back and forth and nesting these strokes together, you can create some nice droops and wrinkle forms. And again, this is a test in the first step in creating wrinkles for the back of this area. But overall, it worked out pretty well. And there's some further form changes that are going to happen until I'm satisfied with it. But the ability for the groom brushes to be used in other sculptural applications is pretty exciting. Give it a try. I think you guys will be surprised at how well they work. Well, there you go. That's our short but sweet part 6, and I'll see you back here with posing.